So, the two most recent videos I have on my channel now are both covers of a song by this artist, this Japanese guy. His name's Everspeeds. And yeah, the song's called Iijikan, which means good times in English. Yeah, he makes a lot of good music. All of it's pretty low-key. Pretty chill, pretty nice music. It's nice relaxing music, so if your music taste fits that description, definitely give it a look. To make the English version, I translated the Japanese lyrics myself. So this video is going to describe the process and the steps which it took to actually do that. No one will be forgotten. So to kind of illustrate what I was doing, I've got an example of an English song which was actually translated into Japanese, and that song is Take Me Home Country Road, Take Me Home, yeah, by John Denver. And here you see the original lyrics. You know, you've got almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Mountains, Shenandoah River. So you've got those lyrics. But then you go to the Japanese lyrics, and the Japanese lyrics aren't a translation, aren't a direct translation of those English lyrics. They're actually completely new lyrics in themselves. The content, although being thematically similar, is actually, you know, very different. In fact, there's absolutely no mention of West Virginia or Shenandoah or Blue Ridge Mountains or anything in the Japanese lyrics. They kind of take the vibe and localize it for a Japanese audience, I suppose you could say. So yeah, the Japanese version goes Country road この道ずっと行けばあの街に続いてる気がする Country road. I mean, the melody is the same, but the meaning of the lyrics are different. So really, it's a new song in itself. It's not really Country Road, the original. But songs don't have to be transcribed like that. And there's an example of a song, an Icelandic song, which was originally written by an Icelandic artist, Asgeir, 2014, classic stuff, called King and Cross in English, and Ljendemar, I think would be a way to say that in Icelandic. I don't speak Icelandic. But if you plug the original Icelandic lyrics into Google Translate, you can see that the direct translation is very similar to the English version's lyrics. So this song wasn't exactly localized for an English-speaking audience like the Japanese version of Country Road was. This song has its direct core content message intact, and I don't know, I think that's a good thing, because if you're consuming the translation of an original work, whether it be literature or music, you want to feel as if you're consuming the original and not a, you know, cheap copy, let's say. But what has to be noted is that translating between Icelandic and English and translating between Japanese and English is a completely different difficulty of transcription and translation, because linguistically, Icelandic and English come from very similar roots. I think they're both Germanic languages, historically, whereas Japanese and English have almost no relation at all, especially in their fundamental syntactic and grammatical foundation, which means that the word order is going to be completely different between them, and the amount of syllables you need to say a particular word will be most often different. So for example, the word for age is nenbe in Japanese, and the word for age in English is age. One syllable in English, two syllables in Japanese. So this sort of a dynamic is one you have to negotiate when you're translating between languages which have almost no relation to one another. Whereas in Icelandic, as you can see, the first line, this is glistening, nighttime, nætur, nighttime, dew, dug. I don't know how to say it. I don't speak Icelandic, but you get the point. she is walking with me. So let's jump into this fancy document I've got here. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the problems. The first problem was that there was no translation to begin with, and there was this really dodgy translation I found on some website with a poor translation first and foremost, and it's not singable in English because the lyrics don't fit the rhyme and the meter of the song. However, as I was just alluding, there were some issues. The first of which, the instruments. I've got a dodgy old piano where I live, and I've got an old guitar as well, and I've got a tap dancing shoe, and I've got my voice. So I made do with that. And you know, obviously my voice, absolutely no issues there, so that's not even worth mentioning. And the percussion. So it turns out after I listened to the song back a few times, after I've published it and all that, that having someone hissing in your ear, tss, 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 or tssing in your ear for 5 minutes straight doesn't really vibe. For some reason, all at once, the time had arrived when the airflow you must. But they always slip my mind. Now with that out of the way, let's properly get into it. Some new words I learned: suddenly, gaze, riotous, feeling, blow up sort of thing. Break into a smile, full of, dotani, suddenly. Lukewarm, it's been a while. Come to mind, unexpectedly, loosely, show a brave face. Those were the new words I learned, but that's kind of boring. Number 3. And as though by spontaneous chance. So this is the foundation of what I was doing here. So the 3 criteria I had for success in translating was that the lyrics be memorable, that they have this sort of a hook, that they sort of stick in your mind, that you want to sing them back again. That's, I think, the mark of a good lyric. So, secondly, I wanted the lyrics to be faithful to the original. So that means essentially not like the country road song, but more like the Icelandic song, so that you feel as if you're almost consuming and listening to the real song, to the original song. The third thing which I thought was important was that it can be sung naturally, and that essentially means that the lyrics are written well, and that they fit the rhyme and meter of the song, and that, like I just mentioned a moment ago, it almost seems as if these were the original lyrics. So, the first example I've got for you here is this one. I really do not want it to be heard, the sound of my breathing, my chest heaving. So let's jump into it now. Iki o fukaku suikonda oto. Iki o fukaku, deep, breathing deeply, the sound of deep breathing. I don't want it to be seen by anyone. So I substituted that for I really do not want it to be heard, the sound of my breathing, and my chest heaving. My chest heaving is something I've interpreted myself, taking some artistic license, number 4. But it also fits within the song, but this word here means deep breathing. It's faithful to the original, it fits the rhyme and meter of the song, and I think it sounds quite good. Number 2, we've got there in that moment, a tearful atonement, we laugh with each other as our eyes meet. We laugh with each other as our eyes meet. First of all, it's faithful to the original. There in that moment, at that time, there in that moment, there exactly at that time, sono toki choudo, me ga atte, our eyes meet, me ga atte, hana o susuri nagara waratta. While sniffling, we smile as our eyes meet, basically is what it means. And we laugh with each other as our eyes meet. So here again, I've done a sort of similar rhyme structure to breathing, heaving, moment, atonement. So I'm mirroring what occurred earlier in the verse and using a different rhyme. And then the last one. No one will be forgotten, but they always slip my mind. And as though by spontaneous chance, time lags slower and slower behind. この時間のせい 'cause it's this time. but the translations weren't always perfect, obviously, and sometimes perhaps I took a little bit too much artistic license, so to speak. So, artistic license, what does that mean? You know, at these red moments, these are examples of lyrics which I just interpreted by the surrounding lyrics, and I used them to pad out the rest of the verse so that the rhyme and meter fit well, and the lyrics as a whole would work better. For example, would it consume us is a question which doesn't occur at all in the original lyrics. Maybe that's pretty dodgy. And, you know, I looked up is a lyric which I used to sort of represent this idea of suddenness, because when you look up and then something happens, then it happened suddenly, didn't it? So that's what I did there. Instead of speaking, this is just another example of me imagining the protagonist of this song. If you imagine the lyrics of this song are a story, me imagining this guy trying to sort of confess something to his lover or his girlfriend or whatever, and him sort of doubting himself before he speaks. Bit of a sin. The biggest failure of this whole translation, this whole exercise, was the rhetorical question. So in the song, the chorus has got this repetitious refrain where I presume the protagonist is saying something like, it's because of this, or is it because of this, or is it because of this, or because it's this? And when I'm just speaking, that comes across in English. But when you sing, for some reason, I couldn't get this sort of upward inflection which you use to indicate a question in English. For one reason or another, it just proved to be impossible for me to really get a nice light and interrogative chorus like the Japanese version has. And the most egregious example of all of this was this word for age, nenrei. It's a 2-syllable word. This is the last line of the chorus. You want it to be a good one. And because of my age, you know, it just kind of falls flat. And that's not what you want for the final line of the chorus. You don't want it to fall flat. You want a nice floaty, a nice buoyant sort of lyrical quality. この天気のせい because of the weather. Finally, the rhythm of Japanese lyrics is another thing which I noticed to be very different between English and Japanese. So Japanese is a language which is very staccato, and in its music I would say that that's even exacerbated, where you get this sort of pang 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 sort of beat. Whereas in English, the words kind of sort of melt into one another. Here's an example where I tried to sort of replicate the staccato, short and sharp, syllabic aspect of this Japanese song and Japanese music in general. So I did that in the place where it was the most pronounced. So in this line, which is a pretty great line to be perfectly honest, one of my favorites in the Japanese lyrics, Tara sore ga sugiru no mo wakatta. I sensed it was too much and took a big step back. So what I've done there, essentially, I've only used monosyllabic, 1-syllable English words. And the reason for that is that I can avoid this sort of melting into one another quality of English by not allowing that to happen, by only using words where that doesn't occur, words with 1 syllable. So that is what I was going for with this line here. This is a lot of me talking out of my backside, so if you found this interesting, I can say I'm very glad. I'm kind of sick of this song by now. I've listened to it a lot over the past couple of weeks, so I'm looking forward to doing something else, and there's an ambulance going past outside. So, see you around.